Greetings and welcome to the History Empire Center. George Armstrong Custer, born to a humble blacksmith, rose to become one of the youngest generals in American history during the Civil War. He met his end at the Battle of the Little Bighorn in 1876. Custer epitomized the era in which he lived. While he may not align with contemporary progressive ideals, it is essential to recognize that he existed nearly 150 years ago. Some of his letters and writings regarding Native American Indians may come as a surprise. Therefore, we will allow Custer's own words to convey his perspective. Thank you for joining me. George Armstrong. Custer graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point in 1861. Just before the Civil War commenced, he witnessed nearly half of his classmates leave to join the Confederacy, including his own roommate. In a letter to his sister, Custer expressed, "I do not think we could think more of each other if we were brothers. We never expect to meet again, or if by chance we do, it would be in battle on opposing sides." He would encounter some of his closest friends on the battlefield, showing them no mercy. The military context of the time demonstrated that one could hold a deep respect for their adversary while still engaging in combat. The situation was far more nuanced than the stark dichotomy we often perceive today. Custer's adversaries during the Civil War were the Confederates, while during the Indian Wars, they were the Plains Indian tribes labeled as hostile by the United States government. Regardless of one's perspective on the current Indian policy of the United States, it is clear that Custer, a warrior in his own right, held a deep respect for Native American culture, a sentiment shared by numerous Army officers and soldiers. While I cannot present all of Custer's writings, I will share a few excerpts that challenge contemporary perceptions of him. During his time as a cadet at the United States Military Academy at West Point, he composed an essay for his ethics class entitled "The Red Man." Although it presents a somewhat romanticized and simplistic viewpoint, his admiration is unmistakable. In the concluding paragraph, he reflects on the plight of the Native American. "The red man is alone in his misery. The earth is one vast desert to him. Once it held beauty, but now the home of his youth, the ancestral forests, have been decimated by woodsmen. The hunting grounds have disappeared from his view. He sees himself on the brink of extinction, standing on his last stronghold, gripping his blood-stained rifle, determined to embody the warrior of yesteryear. Soon he will be the last of a noble lineage that once thrived, but is now fading away." For those interested in delving deeper into George Custer's thoughts, he authored a series of articles for the Galaxy magazine between 1872 and 1874, later compiled into the book My Life on the Plains or Personal Experiences with Indians by General George Armstrong Custer. This work details the Hancock campaign of the summer of 1867 and the contentious Washita campaign from November 1868 to spring 1869, including Custer's notable assertion, "If I were an Indian, I often think I would greatly prefer to cast my lot among those of my people adhered to the free open plains rather than submit to the confined limits of a reservation, there to be the recipient of the blessed benefits of civilization, with its vices thrown in without stint or measure." Custer himself disputes the notion that the Army sought confrontations with Native Americans. There exist two distinct groups of individuals who are consistently enthusiastic about instigating a conflict with Native Americans: the military and the settlers on the frontier. This statement, taken from an editorial regarding the Native American issue, is not only inaccurate but also profoundly misleading. I contend that among all segments of our society, it is the military and those residing on the frontier who harbor the deepest fear of an Indian war and are prepared to make significant sacrifices to avert its devastating consequences. I have yet to encounter a military officer who, during a time of peace, has expressed a desire for war with Native Americans. Custer further emphasizes that Native Americans are more valuable allies than adversaries. "It is always a pleasure and a source of interest to have a community of peaceful Native Americans establish their homes near our frontier posts or camps. The regular interactions with Native Americans, from the most respected chief to the youngest child, their exchanges of greetings, trade, races, dances, stories, unique traditions, and elaborate ceremonies all contribute to making them far more pleasant as neighbors than as cunning and violent foes." In April 1867, During the early stages of the Hancock campaign, General Hancock sought to convene a council with prominent Cheyenne leaders. The soldiers encountered a group of Cheyenne, and Custer described the scene as follows. We observed one of the most magnificent and impressive military displays executed in accordance with Native American warfare traditions that I have ever witnessed. It was essentially an Indian battle line positioned directly across our path, as if to convey the message, thus far and no further. The Native Americans were mounted adorned in their most vibrant attire, their heads adorned with striking war bonnets, their lances flying crimson flags, and their bows strung with quivers full of arrows. Chiefs could be seen riding alongside, seemingly guiding and encouraging their warriors towards acts of valor. The Cheyenne dog soldiers were implicated in numerous assaults on frontier settlements in U.S. forces, and Custer characterized them in this manner. We observed one of the most remarkable and formidable military exhibitions, crafted in accordance with the Indian martial tradition, that I have ever had the privilege to witness. It was a clear demonstration of an Indian battle line positioned directly across our path, as if to declare a boundary. The Indians were mounted, adorned in their most vibrant attire, their heads adorned with striking war bonnets, their lances displaying crimson pennants, and their bows robust with quivers full of arrows. Chiefs could be seen riding alongside, seemingly guiding and encouraging their warriors towards acts of valor. The Cheyenne dog soldiers were involved in numerous assaults on frontier settlements and U.S. forces. Custer characterized them as a group of warriors primarily made up of Cheyenne, yet including the most unruly and uncontrollable spirits from various tribes. They were undoubtedly the most challenging, audacious, and warlike faction found on the plains. Their warriors were all impressive braves, possessing magnificent physiques, and in both appearance and conduct, they closely embodied the archetype of a warrior more than any other tribe. In recounting an encounter with some warriors who attacked the rear guard of the 7th Cavalry, Custer observed one warrior's horse being shot from beneath him, causing the brave to be thrown off. Custer noted, "I witnessed him fall and called to an officer commanding the troop to charge forward and capture the Indian, but the fallen warrior's comrades were hastening to his aid. He was on his feet in an instant, and shortly thereafter, another warrior, mounted on a swift pony, was at his side. With a single leap, the dismounted warrior climbed onto his companion's pony, thus placing an additional burden on the valiant little steed, which galloped away with both courageous riders. Although I felt disheartened by the failure of the pursuing party to apprehend the Indians, I could not entirely suppress a sense of satisfaction, if not joy, that for once the Indian had successfully evaded the white man. They were undoubtedly the most challenging, audacious, and combative group encountered on the plains. Their warriors were strikingly handsome individuals with impressive physiques, embodying the ideal of a warrior more closely than any other tribe. In recounting an incident where some warriors attacked the rear guard of the 7th Cavalry, Custer observed one warrior's horse being shot from beneath him, causing the brave to fall. Custer noted, "I witnessed his fall and called to an officer in command of the troop to advance swiftly and capture the Indian, but the fallen warrior's comrades were hastening to his aid. He was back on his feet in an instant, and shortly after, another warrior on a swift pony was by his side. With a single leap, the dismounted warrior mounted his companion's pony, thus burdening the valiant steed with two courageous riders who galloped away effortlessly. Although I felt disheartened by the failure of the pursuing party to apprehend the Indians, I could not entirely suppress a sense of satisfaction, if not joy, that for once the Indian had outmaneuvered the white man." It is unnecessary to mention that any fleeting feelings of compassion toward the two Indians were inspired by their individual bravery and the heroic display of camaraderie in their successful effort to assist a friend in need. In My Life on the Plains, Custer elaborates on his encounter with the Kiowa warrior Satanta, who had evaded the 7th Cavalry for over a year. Satanta was sought for numerous offenses, including the capture and murder of members of the Box family, yet Custer portrays him as an extraordinary individual, notable for his eloquence, his relentless warfare against the encroachment of civilization, and his resistance to abandoning his traditional way of life in favor of the mundane and uneventful existence of a reservation Indian. While Satanta was in custody, Custer noted that during his extended imprisonment, Satana's son frequently visited our camp, often delivering significant messages from the chiefs back to their villages. Over time, he and I developed a strong friendship. He was an exceptional marksman, and Satana claimed he was the finest in the tribe. Whenever I found myself with idle time and sought some leisure, we would take our rifles and venture beyond the camp's boundaries to engage in friendly target practice, which was a far more enjoyable way to hone our shooting skills than using each other as targets. In 1873, during the Yellowstone Campaign, Custer came to respect the half-Arikara, half-Lakota Army scout known as Bloody Knife. As their relationship progressed, Custer increasingly depended on Bloody Knife's expertise, referring to him as my favorite scout, without the qualifier of Indian. When Bloody Knife's service with the United States Army concluded, Custer employed him as a civilian and ensured his salary increased from $13 to $50 per month. It was also during the Yellowstone Campaign, amidst ongoing conflicts with the Lakota led by Chief Sitting Bull and the warrior Gall, that Custer recognized the significant advantages of our adversaries, not only in terms of numbers, but also in their proficiency with weapons and horsemanship during combat. On August 4th, during a skirmish in Yellowstone, a warrior charged in front of the U.S. soldier skirmish line, drawing their fire. Custer recounted the subsequent events. I found myself among a group of soldiers, accompanied by Bloody Knife, whose striking features were illuminated by the fervor of battle and a deep-seated desire to seek retribution for the injustices faced by his people. A Sioux warrior repeatedly charged towards the front of our lines, mocking us as he galloped past at full speed. With his Henry rifle elegantly held in his grasp, Bloody Knife observed the warrior's approach, declaring his intention to ensure this would be the last ride for his adversary, sending him to the happy hunting ground. Following this campaign, Custer sought a commendation for Bloody Knife, personally addressing Army headquarters on his behalf. He noted Bloody Knife's relentless dedication, often facing extraordinary risks while being required to provide his own horse. His exceptional efforts in scouting routes well ahead of the expedition rendered his horse unserviceable. No one who accompanied the expedition could deny the invaluable support Bloody Knife provided as a guide. Custer's wife, Elizabeth, often referred to this bond in her memoirs, highlighting the rapport between the two men. Bloody Knife proved to be such an essential scout for the general that they frequently engaged in lengthy discussions while seated on the grass, with dogs resting nearby. They deliberated over regions of the country that the general had never explored, with the scout skillfully drawing detailed maps in the sand using a pointed stick. After the Black Hills expedition of 1874, a reporter questioned Custer, inquiring if he was disappointed by the lack of conflict with the Sioux. Custer acknowledged his disappointment, stating that despite having sent peaceful messages and taking every precaution to prevent hostilities, he had anticipated potential trouble. However, he expressed relief and satisfaction at the expedition's return without bloodshed, clarifying that he had not sought an engagement and congratulating himself and the nation on the peaceful outcome of the mission. In a subsequent interview in 1875 with a journalist from the New York Herald, Custer articulated that the effectiveness of the reservation system hinges on the government fulfilling its commitments. He emphasized that Native Americans possess a profound connection to the lands that hold the remains of their ancestors and are reluctant to abandon them. Their love for their homeland is akin to a religious devotion, as they prioritize their deep-rooted local ties over the land's material value, a sentiment that the white man fails to appreciate and respect. Custer noted that the Native Americans acutely perceived the injustices inflicted upon them, and due to their proud and dignified nature, they harbor resentment. In April 1876, Custer was summoned to testify before Congress regarding corruption within the Grant administration. He highlighted how this corruption adversely impacted the provision of supplies for both U.S. soldiers stationed at forts and the Native Americans at their agencies. Custer recounted an incident where a trader attempted to sell him bags of corn that had already been allocated for an Indian agency. Upon refusing the corn, he received a directive from Washington mandating that he accept it. Custer testified that such corruption resulted in Native Americans living in dire conditions, often on their ponies and nearly starving. While stationed at Fort Abraham Lincoln, Custer sought to provide rations to the Native Americans and attempted to obtain permission to do so. He stated that there was no legal framework permitting him to send supplies, but there existed a law that allowed for the temporary feeding of Native Americans at a military post. He proposed that if the Indian Bureau permitted the Native Americans to come to him, he would distribute rations. However, the Indian Bureau responded that they preferred to manage the feeding themselves, leaving the Native Americans in a state of suffering for 2 months when they could have received sufficient supplies had his suggestion been accepted. Following his testimony before Congress, Custer returned to Fort Abraham Lincoln in the Dakota Territory just in time to participate in the campaign that culminated in the Battle of the Little Bighorn. He brought back gifts for Bloody Knife, including a silver medal inscribed with his name and a handkerchief adorned with blue stars. Libby Custer noted that the general aimed to present Bloody Knife with something unique from the East that no other Native American possessed. On June 21, 1876, Custer wrote to Libby from the campaign, stating that he had some Crow Scouts with him who were well acquainted with the terrain and were impressive in appearance. They mentioned that they had heard he never abandoned a trail and that when provisions ran low, he resorted to eating mules, which was the type of leader they desired to follow, as they were also willing to eat mules. Shortly before reaching the Little Bighorn, Custer met with the Arikara Scouts, who were allied with the U.S. Army, and informed them of their victory over the Sioux. Custer expressed his intention to travel to Washington, D.C. with Bloody Knife, possibly bringing all of them along. The Arikara Scout Red Star recounted Custer's words, stating that his brother Bloody Knife would return home to a fine house built for him and that they would have positions under him, ensuring plenty of food for themselves and their children. Red Star further remarked that Custer possessed a heart akin to that of an Indian, as he would suggest any missing elements in their ceremonies. They mounted their horses, sang songs, and then followed Custer in their march. A common criticism of Custer is that he failed to heed the advice of his Indian scouts when contemplating an attack on the Lakota and Cheyenne villages at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. However, according to the Arikara Scout Red Star, who was an eyewitness, the Indian scouts provided Custer with. Amidst conflicting counsel, Custer opted to heed the Crow Scouts instead of the Arikara Scouts. Red Star recalled Custer's angry declaration that they had not been observed, expressing his desire to wait until nightfall to encircle the Sioux camp. Big Belly criticized this strategy, asserting that the Crow Scouts believed the Dakota had already spotted the army and would alert their forces, prompting an attack on Custer's troops. The Crow urged an immediate assault to seize the Dakota's horses, thereby hindering their mobility. Custer acquiesced, stating that he would proceed as advised, and he followed through with their plan. Despite any respect or understanding Custer may have harbored for the tribes, it did not protect him on June 25, 1876, when the summer campaign commenced with a significant expedition led by Generals Terry and Crook, along with Colonel Gibbon. However, it was Custer's 7th Cavalry that first encountered the united forces of the Lakota and Cheyenne, who were encamped near the Little Bighorn River. Fearing they would disperse, Custer launched an attack. Of the 12 companies of the 7th Cavalry present that day, the 5 under Custer's command perished on the battlefield, with the Lakota and Cheyenne employing their superior numbers and skills to achieve a remarkable and decisive victory. On that day of victory, I came to the realization that I was only beginning to explore the topic. If you have any inquiries or require further information, please feel free to leave a comment. Additionally, I encourage you to like, subscribe, and view other videos, as there are many available. I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.